Zelenskyy of Ukraine has or is, I believe, is still visiting Washington, specifically having a meeting with Donald Trump and his Vice President J.D. Vance. Now, this meeting has only started about 1 hour and a half ago. So we have a few clips from the meeting itself, as well as a lot of stuff is happening. So if anybody else is following it, let me know in the chat if anything also much bigger sort of is said, because there is a lot of tension in the room that you can feel. I have two clips from the meeting, which we'll go through. I think we'll most likely start with it. I had a plan to sort of go with start a few weeks ago and then build from there, from the last episode with it. But the meeting is, as I've said, very it's tense. So it would be good to go through that. Joining me today is Anders, and we should have one more person joining soon. Now, Anders, you haven't been on in the last few weeks to talk specifically about Ukraine. So since the election of Donald Trump, or rather when he was inaugurated, and since he started or decided to start tackling the Ukraine issue, we've heard many things, but what are your thoughts so far about Trump's, let's say, policy when it comes to Ukraine and the negotiation of the deal?
Where to start? I have been for ever since the war started, kind of ambivalent about Ukraine as such. I mean, not ambivalent in terms of who is the culprit here and who is the victim. I mean, it's as clear cut as it can be. This is Russian aggression. Putin is a thug, and at some point or another, you have to stop him. We didn't do it back in, or the Western alliance, if you like, when he took Crimea back in 2013. He invaded Georgia, etc. So he has kind of gotten the idea over the last decade or so that he can continue pushing. And there's no different here. You know, if a deal is stricken between Russia and Ukraine that allows Russia to keep whatever amount of territory they have currently amassed in the eastern part of Ukraine, I mean, that will just provide further encouragement to Putin. He may take a break. But that will give him an opportunity to rebuild his military and his economy in time for the next advance, which, you know, can happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It may not even happen by Putin. It might happen by Putin's successor, whoever he is, because this is not just limited to Putin. This is Russian, if you like, this sentiments of Russian glory, Russian empire, and the Russian Orthodox Church. You know, we know the history of Kiev in Ukraine, the capital being by many seen as the birthplace of Rus, the original Russia, however many centuries ago. And Russians, I think, will not rest until they have that back in their fold. And whether that is Putin or his successor, it's hard to say. Now, so there is no hesitation here that Russia is the aggressor, right? But Ukraine is not a great country either in many ways. If you look at there are certain organizations that publish indices of freedom, indices of human freedom and economic freedom. So one of them is Cato and the Canadian Fraser Institute, who publish a joint index. And then the Heritage Foundation here in the US is also publishing an index. And until very recently, I think Heritage didn't rank Ukraine in their last one because of the war. But for the longest time, Ukraine ranked lower than Russia did, which is quite an achievement, you know. So it's not like we're dealing with a a free country that is great at respecting individual rights of its citizen and so on and so forth, and that is suddenly then attacked by a collectivist aggressor. So in some ways there is it's a war between equals, if you like, in terms of where they stand on these freedom indices. So when it comes to US involvement, I have been ambivalent for that exact reason. Yes, we have to stop Putin at some point or another, but is that Ukraine, or is that, should that have happened in the past? And or can it wait until later? I also think that Europe, I am in total agreement with the current US administration that Europe has to step up to the plate. And I think the wake-up call that has happened over the last months in Europe, or that seemingly has happened, you never know, they might go back to sleep again. I think that is encouraging. And I think that long-term Europe has to take on its own defense, and it's much more in Europe's interest to defend Ukraine against Russia than it is in the US's interest. So that part is good. Now, when it comes to J.D. Vance's recent meddling, his speech at Munich, he said some good things about hate speech and about European countries are not that great at protecting the freedom of speech. But his examples of victimizing the German right party AfD and downplaying the Russian influence on Romanian elections, I think was poorly chosen. Yeah, overall, he had some good points, some bad points there. So to sum it all up, yeah, I'm still ambivalent, and and lurking in the background is, of course, that Russia is a nuclear power, and your guess is as good as mine as to whether Putin would exercise that option at some point or another.
Now, we have also Alejandro joining us, which I'll go to shortly. Just want to mention a few things, because, and as you mentioned, the Heritage Foundation and the Cato Institute doing their rankings, while I think they can provide some amount of information, I generally found them really lacking in sort of like the fundamentals of what makes a country free, because Hong Kong, for example, oftentimes is at the absolute tops, and I wouldn't call that necessarily a country, especially after recent years and the amount of Chinese influence over it, that really makes sense in sort of those regards. Now,
Yeah,
when
so yeah, you're right. It's certainly an imperfect measurement, and I think the Cato Fraser Index is broader than the Heritage Foundation, and I believe that they have at least Cato and Fraser has stopped ranking Hong Kong since the Chinese invasion. So yeah, but for anybody who's interested, go out and look at their websites. It's all free information available, and it's quite interesting to look at.
Yeah, I tried to check Ukraine, and as you say, it's currently NA, so non-applicable. Now I checked 2022, so before the invasion, and they've been ranked 2 points behind Russia, and that is also my different problem is sort of it doesn't show the direction a country is going. What we've seen in the last pretty much decades when it comes to Ukraine is a certain willingness to modernize, a certain willingness to westernize, and to basically join the Western sort of society. The similar thing we saw when it comes to Eastern Europe, pretty much every Eastern European nations. My own country, Slovakia. In the 90s, Slovakia would probably rank even under Ukraine, like now or like even earlier. And the only way for us to get out of it is to have step backs and have a certain willingness to sort of westernize. What we didn't have
Yes,
is Russia invading our borders anytime
right.
we
That
try to
that is correct.
westernize.
But if you look at Ukraine from its return to an independent country and up till the invasion here, and yes, there may have been a certain intent during time at times to modernize, certainly, at least especially after and I don't remember. I mean, there was a lot of
2014 war, yeah,
Russian
exactly.
intervention and such for many years, right, to try to control and create a puppet regime and so on and so forth. But if you compare Ukraine and that intent to modernize has or moved with glacial speed. I think the more proper comparison is to look at the Baltic countries, for instance, which have skyrocketed on these indices. And actually, at least Estonia, I think, and perhaps Latvia are ranked above the US these days. Ukraine has been moving very, very slowly.
Yeah, and I think the counter argument is it's hard to do it when anytime you do it, you get invaded by Russia. But we can maybe jump back to this a bit later. But Alejandro, what are your thoughts? You have been on one episode we did about Ukraine recently. So between now and then, I think when you were on, Trump did already call Zelenskyy dictator. Now, recently, he said he didn't remember he did that. We have the deal sort of on the table, and we have the recent meeting, which I want to go to the video in a bit. But sort of, what are your just brief thoughts when it comes to Trump's dealings?
I think I won't repeat myself too much, but my opinion on Trump was probably one of the lowest from all the people that I know in the objectivist circle. As time has moved on, it's gotten even lower. I think the guy is pure. I'm trying to find the friendly word. Put any ugly word that you want in your mind. I think that guy is a complete negative. Even in the small positives that there exist, it's terrible. The way that he has handled this, the way that he hasn't, that he has approached every single part of this conflict by calling Zelenskyy a dictator, as you mentioned, and not being willing to call Putin one. Putin is a clear dictator, and he's unable to even mention that. It's so bad. And then this gaslighting that happens so often in politics, but Trump takes it to a whole different level of saying, no, I never said that. I never called Zelenskyy a dictator. I think it's so awful, and it leaves such a degree of bad precedents in the culture that I simply cannot bear it. And by the way, for those people who defend Milei, and I think his politics are good. There's a lot of gaslighting as well with his bad behavior, that they always deny that he behaves in a certain way when he very clearly does. And I think that's one of the preludes to one of the really bad things happening. If people think that they can get away with telling you lies, with telling you, no, I didn't do that, when they very clearly did, and you let them go through them, it's a way in which you are sanctioning their lies. And the more that they do that, the more they can get away with things. We will go through this video. I think that behavior is bad if you see it on the streets. To see it on the White House is probably one of the most disgusting, disheartening, vomiting things I've ever seen. I was fuming up when I saw the video. So anyways, I really wouldn't like to see it again, but for the sake of the audience, I will sacrifice myself.
Yeah, so as I mentioned,
If I may just add a comment, so my ambivalence when it comes to the U.S. involvement in Ukraine does not mean that I don't agree with Alessandro when it comes to Donald Trump. I think he's a despicable human being, and it's offensive. And calling Zelenskyy a dictator, you know, basically saying that he started the war. I mean, it's obviously, yeah, it's offensive. And here last week we had a UN resolution coming up that the US did not sign off on. I actually read the resolution, and there may be a couple of paragraphs there that are objectionable with respect to references to international law and such. But then the US submitted its own resolution, and that resolution refused to name Russia as the culprit of the war, as the nation that started the war. So, you know, that's inexcusable.
Yeah, now when it comes to sort of the US support for the Ukraine war, I think there is a certain amount of, I could understand on some level why some might find it objectionable to sort of say aid to Ukraine. The way I sort of look at it is the American foreign policy has been failing since like during World War II by supporting Soviet Union, and we are sort of living the consequences of it. Like Russia, the current Russia wouldn't be here if we didn't do what we did in the Soviet Union. Russia has been targeting American elections, has been helping the Houthis attack American shipping. I think Russia is absolutely an enemy of America. If one way to fight it is provide aid to Ukraine fighting it, there is a question there. I think it really does depend on what you think would happen with Ukraine after the war. If you really think sort of Ukraine is the same kind of evil as Russia, or sort of would devolve in a similar kind of a dictatorship, then I can sort of understand it. My view of it, and it is informed by me living on the border with Ukraine. I know a lot of people who were advising the Zelenskyy administration when he was elected are one of the best economists in Slovakia that set up the sort of Slovak economic miracle. So in many ways, I have a certain trust in Zelenskyy, or in sort of general Ukrainian people of really being committed to sort of changing for the better. But now let's since the meeting has been happening, there have been many different clips. Now the newest one I've seen from being shared is 5 minutes long. So we're gonna go through that. We're gonna stop. Hopefully it has the sort of important points. I wasn't even able to fully go through it since we had a show before and we had this right after. So this is also my first viewing. But I've seen bits of it, and it should definitely be interesting. So let's go to that.
Yes, content. Yes, but after that, he broke this ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it.
Is it audible? Are you guys able to hear good enough what Zelenskyy is saying?
It's a little bit weak.
Yeah.
Actually. Yeah, if you can turn up the volume a little bit. I would...
Okay, so I cannot do it in this one, so let's just quickly throw it in a different video player, which is able to boost it a bit more, and then we can watch it.
And while you're doing that, just a comment on your reference to World War II. As I mean, and I totally agree that this is, and that's part of why this Ukraine situation is so difficult to analyze, because it's just another consequence of a messy U.S. foreign policy and it actually goes back to World War I and U.S. aid of Russian communists. You know, they basically survived and could maintain control of the country thanks to U.S. aid at the time. And if we would have stopped back then, we probably would have lived in a very different world.
Okay, I have it ready. Let's watch it.
Yes, content. Yes, but after that, he broke this ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr.
are not
President,
strong-
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring it into this
Have you ever
conflict.
been to Ukraine? That you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people in your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's
I will
respectful
answer.
to come to the Oval Office
I
of the
will
United
answer.
States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your
A
country?
lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all,
Now, let's cover this bit and then we'll go a bit further. Now, the whole atmosphere is already, I think, really insane. Now, when it comes to specific points, yes, Ukraine does have currently conscription, as did America for most of its existence. It's still bad. It's not something that a really free country should have. But to sort of put that kind of standard or start with that kind of standard, I think is already unbecoming on sort of as like a starting point. Now, when it comes to he said Zelenskyy sending his people to die. A nation is defending itself. Is there never a sort of a case to fight for a war ever because people will die? I mean, that sort of defeatism, if that happened during World War II or any sort of American war, or I mean Civil War, if some people find even World War II example objectionable, if during the Civil War people said, well, which had conscription again, said, well, we shouldn't fight this, there would still be slavery in America. I mean, Anders, what do you make of this starting point that J.D. Vance is
I
saying?
think it's I mean, taking in isolation, I mean, he's right. Conscription is wrong. It's immoral. The draft was immoral when we had it in the US. I mean, it's one of the worst violations of individual rights you can think of, to force someone to fight for something that they may not necessarily support or agree with. Now, I often say that if a country cannot find enough volunteers for its defense, is it worth defending? No, I mean, a country is a conglomeration of individuals, right? And those individuals put a value on that country. And so now, but again, we're in a really tough situation here. But what I think is worse when you hear, and then now we have to listen to the rest of the clip, but taking this issue in isolation, I think it's total context dropping by J.D. Vance here. If he puts this, if he uses this argument without listing or mentioning the long list of Russian offenses during this war, starting with that they started the war, starting with how many soldiers, I mean, are Russians fighting voluntarily for their country in this war? I doubt it. And so that's total context dropping. And I mean, I don't know how to label it. It's kind of a ploy. Now, I find it interesting too, and so there. And I must say, I'm not following or I'm not in the habit of watching Trump's press conferences because they make me sick. I have better things to do in my life. But I don't know if is this a new tactic to have the media involved in the direct discussions like this, watching it? I mean, normally they have a press conference after the fact, but it seems like they're sitting in front of the cameras hashing this out, which sounds like really, really bad foreign policy. But I'd be interested to hearing what you say or what the viewers may be commenting on.
Yeah, I'll go to Alejandro shortly. I think I'm not necessarily sure if this is sort of unique thing to Trump, but it is something we've seen in the last few days with Macron, with Starmer, and now with Zelensky, that they actually do argue over, like, while having this sort of press conferences. If people remember, when it came to Macron, and I'm trying to remember what specifically it was, but yeah, Trump was bringing out some point, and Macron was like correcting him, like on camera, which is that's you're getting into sort of a territory. So I don't think this, like them arguing, is even something that is in a sense planned. It's like JD Vance says something, he needs to stand by it. Zelensky will of course push back because he won't allow to get himself walked over, and then JD Vance has to push back again. So it's sort of this upping up of pressure, which in some ways it is really unique. We haven't seen as we definitely there was probably something similar that happened in the past, but sort of in the last few days it keeps like happening again and again. But Alejandro, what do you make of JD Vance, how he pretty much starts talking to Zelensky?
Well, this is a very Trumpian behavior. Back in the day, politicians used the ancient carrot stick method. Whenever they saw a bullying a weaker country, they either offered the bully a carrot or fought him with a stick. Now Trump sees the bullied country and grabs a stick to join the bully to fight him. And we will see further into the video. It gets way much heated. But I think regardless of the point, I think the main and core things that we should ask to America is to morally sanction the people who are better and morally disapprove those who are not. The money, it's not that important, and the fighting, and if you are able, you allow or to keep on fighting, it's not that important as if you say, hey, I think you are the good guy here, maybe I won't be able to provide you weapons anymore, hey, keep fighting, you're the good one. And that's exactly the opposite of what the Trump administration has been doing. Regardless of the whitewashing of all the Trump acolytes and champions, the main issue here is that you are removing any kind of sanction, support, moral embracing of Ukraine, and you're giving it to one of the most disgusting, most reprehensible, most violent dictatorships in the world. Dictatorships that have called people into your country, that have killed people in Germany, in the UK, in several of your so-called allies. And instead of saying, hey, I don't want to deal with you, you're a really bad guy, you started the war, and you should really backtrack. What you're doing is, whenever the other guy comes into the Oval Office, is you start to bully him. And of course, he doesn't have any clue. JD Vance is a really piece of scum. He's very clearly making a political point and not a moral one. And I really despise Catholics. So one more to the list.
We have a super chat from Jonathan, thank you so much, and a super chat from Christian, thank you so much. He says, you missed the point, the argument, thank you, Christian. He says, the argument of JD Vance is that Ukraine cannot win the war if they don't find enough soldiers wanting to fight, so time to deal. Now, if we want to be super honest, the fact is that Ukraine is most likely not recovering its territory in the current future. But you don't say that publicly and to Ukraine as if this is why Ukraine has to make a deal. Again, if you find objectionable the fact that Ukraine is conscripting its people to the army to defend its country, how can you not find objectionable the fact that Russia is conscripting to fight in another country? That should be an order of magnitude worse. And it's never been on Russia has to get out of the country, it's always Ukraine has to surrender because it cannot win. Russia cannot win either. Why is it not on them to surrender?
Russia is the party that is not winning the war. Remember that they started it. They thought they were going to win it. Now their economy is crumbling down. They need probably one of the poorest countries in the world to face this war. They're using North Korean fighters. They're using North Korean weapons. They lost Syria. They're probably extremely weak economically today. If someone is bracing for the fall, is bracing to not win the war and to probably retract, it is Russia. It is Putin who is praying that Trump keeps supporting it more than Zelenskyy. I appreciate that, that you give the super chat, but I truly disagree.
Anders, anything to add before we continue?
Yeah, just a disclaimer. I have not watched any parts of this interview before we're sitting here, so may not be the context that the super chatter provided. I was not aware of. I still think this moral equivalence that Vance and Trump seem to draw between Russia and Ukraine is abhorrent. I mean, morally there's no discussion of where the blame lies, and so it's
now
I'll leave it there.
Because some people in the chat are saying neither side can win the war, so let's have a deal. Again, I think you can possibly come up with something like that, but the fact that all the pressure is currently, or all the pressure from the American administration is on Ukraine to make the deal, to basically surrender, to surrender territory, to surrender its resources. Now, again, it's not for a country to sort of even control its resources. It should be left to the private companies and people. The fact that Ukraine is still in the current sort of idea of a deal, is not offered any security guarantees, and is pretty much just left there for Russia to invade it again, is I think showing the way Trump is going about it. He knows, or he thinks, or it's much harder to strong arm Russia, so he would rather strong arm Ukraine. And if that is viewed as something positive, I don't think.
And don't forget that Trump admires strongman. He has praised Putin. He has praised Xi. I don't know that he has explicitly praised the mullahs in Iran, but North Korea certainly, and he has an admiration for them and for what they're doing. And on some level, it's almost like he wants to join the club, which is obviously scary.
Yeah, I think as someone said about Trump's comments about Zelenskyy and calling him a dictator, that Trump doesn't actually think he's a dictator, because if he thought he was a dictator, he would be praising him, and he would be saying how great Zelenskyy is, which he does with actual dictators like Putin and as you mentioned, Xi. But let's listen a bit more.
During the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have a nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know.
bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good. We're going to feel very good and very strong. You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. It's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
Now, what is J.D. Vance saying is basically Zelensky should be basically on its knees thanking that, you know, American government or America has provided support to Ukraine. Now, again, that wasn't Trump doing. It was Biden's doing. It was Biden who supported Ukraine. It was Biden and his support of Congress that led the support for Ukraine. And whenever there was a pushback against support for Ukraine, it came from Trump. It came from Trump telling Republicans not to support Ukraine. So, again, this whole meeting, very, again, super sort of weird the way it's done. Now, even when Trump says you are gambling with World War III, again, he's calling for surrender. This is the exact same arguments they were using at the Munich conference, basically saying we need to prevent World War II. We need to prevent sort of another great conflict. So we just have to surrender a bit of Czechoslovakia to the Nazis. This is exactly what Trump and J.D. Vance are calling for right now. There is no difference for it. Now, again, we can state, maybe there is a time for a deal, but if you start like this, you are surrendering to dictators. You are not working towards any deal that sort of supports more freedom in the West. You are providing Russia with what it wants. And there's any thoughts on more of this clip?
I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I just find it disgusting even to watch this. And I think it reinforces my decision that my life is too short to spend time on on watching presidential conferences on X. So I'll leave.
Alejandro?
Alejandro, comment.
Well, if I saw that in a restaurant, like the maitre d' calling like that to one of his employees, I would never come back to a restaurant. But remember that this is the Oval Office, where all the presidents in history, with all its mighty history of America, have been sitting down. The simple act of making this a mixture of a showmanship, of the most disgusting behavior. By the way, they allowed the Tate brothers to come back to America. Maybe they taught Trump how to behave like a real asshole. Sorry, he already knew that. But anyways, the way that, like, it's such a degree of sacrilege that is happening over here that it's very difficult to untangle. Talking uglily to a person behind doors would be probably bad enough in the context of someone being an ally of you, but making this in public and you being wrong is such an awful thing to presence, such an awful thing to see from someone that truly admires America's history, that it's very difficult to me to digest everything as such.
Yeah, I do not like to sort of appeal to you either get it or you don't sort of rhetoric. But if you like watch this and yeah, basically you don't get what is sort of really ugly about this, I think it's sort of hard to even like really put it into words, because there's just so many sort of different layers to this. We have a super chat, or rather, Robert has been a member for 34 months. Thank you so much. He says, Alejandro is right. This is about much more than money, much more than arms. Otherwise, there is no difference between one country and another. And yeah, some people are saying, Zelensky doesn't have any leverage. And again, that's such a disgusting way of really talking about it. This is not like a trade negotiation where someone is buying an iPhone from someone else and that other person needs the iPhone much more so we can get a better price for it. This is a nation that has no respect for individual rights, Russia, invading not super free country, but relatively a country that is willing to westernize and is working on bettering its situation. And you are talking about it again as if it's some sort of benefit deal. You know, let's work out the deal that works for everybody. No, it's Russia should get out. That's the only acceptable, morally acceptable thing that can happen. Now, realistically, there might be a ceasefire, there might be a deal, but it should never be taken as the moral outcome of this situation. It's the unfortunate reality of Ukraine not being able to fully defend itself and the West not fully supporting it. It shouldn't be the fact that this is some sort of moral outcome, the fact that we give in millions of Ukrainians under Russian control. Anything to add before we...
Yeah, I was just trying to introspect a little bit. Why do I find this so revolting? You know, just watching this exchange of this airing of dirty laundry or whatever you want to call it, and it makes me feel dirty. You know, it's kind of sullying the office of the presidency of the President of the United States. You know, something that I deeply admire, although I abhor its current occupier. So I think it's revulsion is almost the emotion that I feel about it, and it's like we have moved very far from the founding ideals in that sense.
We also have a super chat from Ginger. Thank you so much. Let's listen a bit more. There's about 2.5 minutes left. So,
do we have to?
Well, let's see.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war,
he's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble. Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone. And we are thankful. I said thanks.
You haven't been alone. You haven't been alone. We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and your men are brave, but they had to use our military. If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
Again, just say thank you.
I said a lot of times
except
to American people.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good.
So again, J.D. Vance brought up, you know, why are you bringing this up in front of American public? He brought it up. He is the one who instigated this. What kind of rhetoric is this? Now, again, Trump sort of trying to gaslight. Oh, J.D. Vance is not raising his voice. I mean, come on. Like, are we even ignoring, like, I know Trump can one time say Zelenskyy is a dictator and then deny it a few weeks later, but he can now deny something that happened like 10 seconds ago. Like, again, this is we have Raz in the chat nauseating. I mean, it really is. Zelenskyy said, like, yeah, Putin said it, we would be over in 3 days. That's what Putin said. And I think what he was pointing to was, yeah, that Trump is pretty much spreading sort of, or using Russian talking points, using like Russian propaganda to sort of argue against Zelensky. Now, again, the main reason why Ukraine is standing as it is when this happened, Zelensky refused to leave Kiev and continued fighting. Now, without the Western support, both from America and Europe, more America at the start, it has to be said, they would not be able to fight for as long. But again, it comes from within. It comes from the fact that Ukraine is willing to fight for itself, for its independence, and the fact that this is being looked at in this way is really, yeah, nauseating is a really proper word. I mean, Anders, yeah, what can you say?
Yeah, regardless of the outcome here, I think we'll just find that we're making between the Europeans and the US. And again, I'm ambivalent about what the actions should be here. And as you mentioned, it goes way back to in history the very inconsistent, pragmatic US policy that has brought us to where we are today. But I'm thinking at the end of the day, we'll probably end up, there will probably be a deal of some kind or another, and Putin will get his chance to go back and lick his wounds and rebuild his economy and rebuild his military, and we'll be back here again in 5 to 10 years and talk about whatever his next incursion has been. Whether that is another attack on Ukraine, or if he wants to pick off the Baltic states or make further incursions into other republics, we don't know, but we know that it will not be good.
Alejandro?
This part of the video made me go back to when you were a kid and your parents sat you down and try to put you into place. Now, the real context here is, imagine that you were right, your parents were wrong, they were complete idiots, and they keep, and as you try to pull calling them into what was right, they keep shouting louder and louder, and they wouldn't let you speak. That's the kind of feeling I have. True deep impotence and real anger. I told you, it wasn't nice.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, generally, this like asking, have you even said thank you? I mean, it's such a like it's such a weird thing to say. I mean, there's nothing really else to say. Like, if a country, not to mention, first of all, when it comes to foreign policy, a country should only ever help another country if it's in its self-interest. That's why I really like this. John Stossel has one video where I don't even remember the context, but basically when you like buy a hot dog at a hot dog stand or do any sort of trade, you say thank you and they say thank you, right? You both say thank you to each other because you understand this trade is to mutual benefit. When it comes to any foreign aid, it should be understood. When it comes to America providing aid to Israel, Ukraine, or any nation across the world, the number one goal should be this is to our own benefit first. That's why we're doing it. And that's why whenever I say that I think there is a case for US aid going into Ukraine, my case is Russia is an enemy that has to be fought. If we can, there has to be a war with Russia. If we can sort of prevent the deaths of Americans, if we can prevent sort of the damage done to America by providing aid that we are allied with to fight that country, to fight against them, it's absolutely in our self-interest to do so. Not to mention me living on a border with Ukraine, I obviously would think it's in our self-interest to help Ukrainians, because I know if Ukraine falls and if the NATO policy under Trump is going to change, NATO will no longer work in the way that we hoped it would. And my own country is getting, maybe not invaded, but is getting taken over by Russian influence very soon after Ukraine. We have a super chat from Christian. Thank you so much. He says, they really treat Ukraine as a colony. That's nauseating, even for people who, like me, think that the deal is sadly unavoidable because Ukraine was never allowed to try to win. And yeah, I think that is absolutely the case. When it comes to even what Ukraine was allowed to do, they weren't allowed to strike within Russia for a very long time until the sort of last, I think, few months. Before I'm not sure if before the election or before the inauguration of Trump, but basically it was very recently that even Ukraine was allowed to strike within Russia. When it came to invasion of Kursk, Biden administration didn't know about it. Ukrainians did it by themselves. And if Zelenskyy brought it up or Ukraine brought it up to America, we are going to invade Russia, they wouldn't allow that. And you cannot win a war unless you can strike within the enemy territory. That is simply like a I don't know what to call it, but like a really dumb way of thinking about the war. You do it by striking at the source. Anything you guys like to add before we'll just pass through the rest of the video?
Thank you.
For the American people to see what's going on.
I understand, sir.
I think it's
I
very
understand.
important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards. You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look. If you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
I said to you,
I want a
with
ceasefire
guarantees.
because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me. That wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person. That was with Obama.
It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question to Mr. Vice President.
So that's the rest of it. I think Robert brings up a good point in the chat. He says, again, Zelenskyy should and has thanked the United States, but that's very different from thanking Donald Jr. Trump. Donald Trump in the present negotiations. The USA does deserve thanks. Donald Trump does not. And yeah, I mean, pretty much what we've seen from the inauguration is Trump pressuring Ukraine into surrendering, into basically forcing to give up. And again, with something that Zelenskyy brought up, with no security guarantees. With the current deal, there is some deal we won't have. There is definitely going to be another time to talk about what the deal includes. But most importantly, what it doesn't include is any future proofing, any guarantees that this won't happen again. This is what Russia does. Whenever there is a chance that a country might join NATO or that a country might lean Western, they invade it so they can get, because they know they will benefit from it. And what we've seen is exactly this. Ukraine was, under Zelenskyy, was westernizing, was aligning itself closer to the European Union and the West, so he had to invade it. And now he is rewarded because of it. He is gonna get a bunch of Ukrainian land, most likely. He'll get to take over millions of Ukrainians, and he might get another shot in few years to invade Ukraine again. Alejandro, any last thoughts on what has been said?
Let me give you my final thoughts. They mentioned World War III and trying to avoid it. I think what we have seen with the conflict in Israel and the conflict of Ukraine is that there are in the global chess, there are pieces moving towards a major global conflict. The two main pieces are Russia and Iran. They know it. Russia and Iran have agreed, they have treaties, they have relied upon each other in their respective conflicts. The West hasn't. Israel and Ukraine haven't been very good at dealing with each other. These movements by Trump of trying to appease both conflicts will maybe they will extinguish the fire, whatever happens, but it won't extinguish it with sand. It will extinguish it with gunpowder. And what I think will trigger is that you will bring on China into the main conflict. If they see that the West is as coward, as bullish, and as weak as to let this conflict go with a major defeat on both fronts, then I think China will be inevitable to go into the people of the bats. I fear that, and let alone everything that we discussed today. It's really, really disheartening to see what we saw today.
Anders, any last thoughts?
Well, try to end on a slightly positive note. If you look at the U.S. foreign policy history, it's been a mess, and we have muddled along, and somehow we have muddled along. And hopefully we'll be able to muddle along this time as well. It will cost us, I'm sure. As Alessandro said, Putin will be back after whatever deal is stricken here. But as a palate cleanser to end with, just to provide a little bit of a vision of what a rational foreign policy would look like, check out my latest article on my Substack, Anders Ingemarsson at Substack or .substack.com. The title is "No, Mr. Trump, this is not how to conduct foreign policy."
We have Raz in the chat saying, watching this, it's surprising that Trump doesn't openly support Hamas. That would be a consistent position. Yeah, I mean, calling for a ceasefire, calling so explicitly for a ceasefire, basically, well, we don't want people dying, so let's call for a ceasefire, which again doesn't stop the killing, doesn't stop the sort of the evil that's happening. It's just putting a pause on it until the side that decided to do it will say, well, let's do it again. Why, if a country invades another country, why would they have respect for any sort of ceasefire? And as a last point, as I always like to say, which I took from Ryan Macbeth, is Ukraine war is not about Ukraine, it's about Taiwan. And the fact is China is looking at a really pathetic West that is not willing to defend Ukraine, that we have a railway from Poland directly to Ukraine where we can supply it. So how well are we gonna try to defend Taiwan, which is across the ocean? Now, if you have a problem potential with Ukraine not being as free, Taiwan is one of the freest nation in the world right now, and I think any arguments for or justifying Chinese aggression towards Taiwan is definitely misguided. But with that, thank you. I forgot to ask, Alejandro, where can people find you?
You can check the contributions I made to the Substack in RC UK. I mentioned Milei. You can see my whole view of his character and his policies over there.
And Anders, you mentioned your Substack. Is there anything else you'd like to promote?
Yes, sure. My book, Think Right or Wrong, Not Left or Right. You can find it on Amazon near you.
And with that, thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of The Daily Objective. Thank you and bye-bye.
Good premises.